Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Magnificent Warriors, a Hong Kong action movie from 1987 that stars Michelle Yeoh. Now, per the recent Blu Ray release, this is an action-adventure in the tradition of Raiders of the Lost Ark, involving a daredevil pilot spy who fights against the occupying Japanese forces in World War II China. Her latest, toughest mission is to rescue the ruler of the city of Kayi from the hands of a ruthless Japanese general and his advancing army, filled with fights and Michelle Yeoh's trademark stunts, including her use of a bullwhip in the style of Indiana Jones. It's the second time they mentioned that movie. And literally nonstop action. This is a crowd pleaser for everyone. So, I'll be the judge of that, But the primary conflict in this movie is that the Japanese military are planning to convert the town into a chemical weapons manufacturing site, and Michelle Yeoh needs to extract the local leader, acquire some vital information, and stop the bad guys. Now, the plot synopsis is mostly accurate when it describes this movie as nonstop action. There's quite a few action scenes in this. The only chunk of runtime that's a bit on the slow side is like a 20-minute section that precedes the finale. So let's just talk about the action first in this one. The opening scene is quite entertaining. It involves Michelle Yeoh, of course, her whip, and a good number of opponents. There's some martial arts, weaponry, gunplay, and horses. And this gives you a taste of the style of action to expect for the remainder of the movie. And it's a pretty neat mix of elements. You get your Hong Kong style of action that's infused into an adventure story that's set during like the 1930s. And, it also incorporates the technology associated with that time period. So it has a little bit of a different flavor from like your, modern, contemporary set Hong Kong action flick. Then, just a few minutes after that scene, Michelle fights some men in a warehouse-like building, and she's armed with a rope with a blunt object at the end. I forgot the name of this style of weapon, but that's what she uses. And she fights like a mini-boss who's armed with a sword, and it's a pretty legit fight with some sweet finishing moves involving the rope weapon. Next, we get an airplane duel that's, effectively filmed. A short bar fight, a scrappy street fight. It keeps peppering these fights in at pretty consistent intervals, which is quite nice. However, my personal favorite fight scene in the film is when Michelle battles against a bunch of military dudes who are armed with spears. And she uses the spears to her advantage, as well as some fire. And she runs across rooftops. It's a pretty sweet scene, and there are some hard-hitting falls, as we expect from this industry back in the day. Some of the stuntmen take some spills. The finale is like a showdown, an explosive battle involving a large number of people. The Japanese military attempt to take down a stronghold that our protagonists have secured, and it involves all kinds of military stuff like bullets, bombs, wall scaling, hand-to-hand combat, etc. It's pretty satisfying way to end the film. So if you want a briskly paced action flick, there's enough action in this to satisfy for sure. Now, on the other hand, I would say that the story did feel kind of sloppy. I don't usually care about this kind of flaw in a 90-minute action movie, but it bothered me more than usual here, at least during the opening like 20 to 30 minutes. And I was trying to figure out why it was bothering me in this case. I think it's because, in a typical urban cops and robbers flick, you really don't need an introduction. You get a protagonist cop who shows up, or cops, and usually they'll have their badges on, or they'll say, CID or whatever, and you already know these guys are, cops. And then they'll go into a building and start beating people up. You're like, oh, I kind of get what's going on. It's like a raid, right? Whereas this movie, we're out in the middle of nowhere, with a bunch of unidentified people that just start fighting. And you're like, I was kind of confused. I'm like, wait, who are these people? Like, why exactly are they fighting each other? And it did bother me a little bit early on. I mean, obviously the film does clear things up with like a data dump scene at the 20-minute mark. But, I don't know, I feel like they could have put that scene at the beginning of the movie, so I kind of knew like what was going on early on. But not a huge problem, but it did bother me more than usual in this. Back to the positives, though. This is one of my favorite performances by Michelle Yeoh. She smiles a lot, seems to be having fun, which kind of rubs off on the viewer when you're watching the film. Very charismatic performance by her. The music, very like bombastic, loud instrumental stuff. It sounds epic, like classic Hollywood style music. It reminded me of something you might hear from like Conan the Barbarian or Conan the Destroyer with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Has that type of like rhythm to it. It's good music, but they do use the same orchestral hook, maybe a little bit too much, and it gets a little bit repetitive at times. One interesting observation I made was that David Chung directed this, the same man who directed Royal Warriors 1 year earlier in 1986. So he made Magnificent Warriors and Royal Warriors with Michelle Yeoh in both. And, Royal Warriors, as we all know now, after that Blu Ray release, is a pretty fantastic action flick that's in the Line of Duty franchise. Now, after looking at this guy's filmography, he only directed a handful of movies back in the day, instead spent most of his career as a cinematographer, a pretty prolific one. But I kind of wish he directed more movies, because the dude had legit talent. But whatever, the small number of movies he directed were quite good. Now, when all is said and done, Magnificent Warriors is a very easy recommendation for you if you like Hong Kong action flicks. Currently available on Blu Ray from 88 Films. And as always, we'll see you next time.